There's a special rule in my family. No matter what I do, I have to get permission from my younger sister, Burnett Emerson, first. However, Burnett dies the year I turn 5. So, every time I ask Mom for something, she lights a candle and tells me. If the candle goes out within 1 minute, that means Burnett has agreed to it. But the candle never goes out on its own. So, over the years, I've never worn pretty dresses or gone to amusement parks. I have no idea what cake tastes like either. Sometimes when I get sick, I can't even go to the hospital because Burnett hasn't given me permission. Now that I'm older, my vision is impaired and I have a severe gastric problem. Every time I show even a hint of dissatisfaction, Mom will scream at me, "If it weren't for you, Burnett wouldn't have died back then. You owe her this much, so you have no right to complain. At least you're still getting fed, aren't you?" But what about her? She's already buried 6 feet under. Eventually, I believe I'm the reason Burnett died. And that thought has haunted me for most of my life. Later on, I make a deal with death, trading my life for hers. I will return to the past and die in Burnett's place. After death, my soul drifts back home. I see Mom hugging Burnett with joyful tears rolling down her cheeks. It's all my fault for putting disinfectant in a juice bottle. Still, it's a good thing Dahlia got to it first. If you'd been the one who drank it instead, I wouldn't know how to live with that. My birthday wish when I turned 18 was to adopt Pepper, a stray cat in our neighborhood. After all, the 10 minutes I spent playing with Pepper on my way home from school every day were the only time I felt alive. I knew Mom wouldn't agree to it, but I still muster my courage and made the suggestion. As expected, Mom flew into a rage. "Your sister died and was robbed of everything she could have had, but you want to use my hard-earned money to feed a worthless stray? How on earth did I end up with such a wretched daughter like you?" Lowering my head, I insisted. "Pepper is a good cat. He can catch mice, and he doesn't eat a lot. It won't cost much to feed him. I can save up some pocket money to buy food for him." Mom was so mad that she started pacing around in circles with her hands on her hips. "If you can be so nice to a mere animal, why were you so cruel to your sister back then? Remember, you're the one who killed your sister. So you deserve to spend the rest of your life drowning in guilt. You have no right to be happy." She jabbed a finger at my forehead. "Why couldn't it have been you who died back then?" Mom said I was being naughty. Back then, I had filled a juice bottle with disinfectant and told my sister, Burnett Emerson, to drink it. Burnett was rushed to the hospital to have her stomach pumped, but she still didn't survive. That was how we lost her. I was too young back then, so I actually didn't remember much of it. But since everyone told me that was what happened, I believed them. The crushing guilt weighing on my heart was suffocating. So, no matter what Mom said, I would choose to silently bear it. But this time I wanted to stand my ground. The security guard said, "He'll be taking the stray cats to an animal shelter soon. If I don't bring Pepper home before then, I won't get to see him ever again. Also, it's my 18th birthday, Mom. Can't you grant this one wish of mine?" All my classmates said turning 18 was an important event. On their 18th birthday, no matter what they asked for, their parents would give it to them. So now, why was Mom so mad that even her eyes had turned red? As always, Mom lit a candle in a corner of the room. "Fine, I know you're not going to listen anyway. Go ask your sister." Then my gaze darkened. For as long as I could remember, the candle had never once gone out. I stared at the burning candle silently, counting in my mind 1, 2, 3. As soon as I counted to 60, Mom put the candle away. "All right, that's a full minute. Your sister doesn't agree. This conversation is over. If I see even a single cat hair in this house, you know what's coming." That night, I had a fitful sleep. Even when I did fall asleep, I kept having nightmares in my dreams. After Pepper was taken to the animal shelter, the bigger cats ganged up on him, and he cried so much that it broke my heart. In another scene, Pepper didn't go to the animal shelter. Instead, he was sent to the slaughterhouse. His fate there was too horrifying to describe. I even dreamed about bringing Pepper home. But then Burnett stood next to me, asking me as blood gushed from her eyes, "Dahlia, how can you be so kind to a cat, but so heartless that you'd want me dead?" Next day, I spent all my pocket money on Pepper's favorite cat treat. But when I got back to the neighborhood, I couldn't find him anywhere. Mom suddenly appeared behind me. "Stop calling for that cat. I just told the property management that the cat is hurting the residents." I stood right there and watched them kill him and toss him in the bin. Pulling out her phone, Mom took a step in my direction. I even took a video of it. "Do you want to see?" I covered my ears and let out a scream. "No, no." Fearing that I might see Pepper's mangled body, I turned around and ran upstairs. Before I realized it, I had run all the way up to the roof. And I found myself standing on the very edge of the building. At that moment, I suddenly couldn't find any reason to keep living anymore. I was suddenly in free fall, and the wind whipped past my ears. I met Death himself. Death said he was just passing by, and he could make a deal with me. According to your original fate, some branches will break your fall, and the bones in your right leg will shatter. You'll survive, but that's too boring. So, why don't you make a deal with me? I'll move those annoying branches away, so you'll be smashed into pieces. Then you'll trade your life to bring your sister back. I nodded almost immediately. I'll do it. If Burnett were still alive, Mom wouldn't have a reason to hate me anymore. So, even if I died, I would be happy as long as Mom loved me. My lips curved into a faint smile. Suddenly, a white light flashed before my eyes. I was sent back in time to when I was 5 years old. This time, I was the one lying on the hospital bed, getting my stomach pumped instead. Meanwhile, Burnett was running and jumping around in the hospital corridor. Outside, I still remembered that when the doctor pronounced Burnett dead, Mom had broken down in tears outside the ward. She crouched down until she was at eye level with me, then screamed hysterically, "Why would you put disinfectant in a juice bottle?" I was shocked out of my wits. And even though it happened just moments ago, I couldn't remember the exact details of the incident. I only remembered Burnett suddenly foaming at the mouth, right in front of me, her face pale. I didn't say anything. Then Mom began pulling at her own hair. Why did I even bother going out? Why didn't I stay home to keep an eye on the kids? Dad tried to comfort her, but she immediately snapped at him. You were driving too slow. If you had gone faster, our daughter wouldn't have died. Later on, Mom would even divorce Dad for that very reason. The light above the operating room went out. The doctor came out and took off his mask. I'm sorry for your loss. We did everything we could. I turned around a little nervously, looking at Mom with a hint of expectation. But Mom seemed extremely calm, and she just let out a faint sigh. Thank you for your hard work, doctor. I was still holding out hope. I remembered my teacher saying that when some people experienced extreme sorrow, sometimes they wouldn't be able to cry. Instead, they would stay unusually calm. However, Mom turned to look at Dad, say, "Why would Dahlia drink that out of the blue? What a glutton. Burnett is just a year younger than Dahlia, but she's so much better behaved." Well, at least Dahlia didn't make it. If she got into the ICU, she'd be dragging us all down with her. I heard that even a day in the ICU costs a fortune. We just saved up some cash to get Burnett a piano, so we can't have that money spent on Dahlia. Instead, Dad patted Mom on the shoulder. He didn't agree or go along with it. He simply said, "Come on, let's make preparations for the funeral." For a long time, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pain tore through me as I thought, this can't be happening. It shouldn't play out like this. Mom should have been in utter agony. Wait, is this because I was the one who died instead of Burnett? I suddenly realized a truth I didn't want to admit. Mom only cared about Burnett. Suddenly, Burnett came pattering over. She wrapped her arms around Mom's leg and looked up at her. "Mom, what's Dahlia doing in there? Why isn't she coming out?" "I'm hungry." Mom bent over and picked Burnett up. Her annoyance from just now had disappeared, and she said in an extremely gentle tone, "What would you like to eat, Burnett? Let's have that for dinner." All right. She was heading outside with Burnett in her arms, when she suddenly turned around and glanced at the operating room. She looked like she had suddenly remembered something. She said, "Well, I guess I'm partly to blame for this. I filled a juice bottle with disinfectant, but I forgot to warn the kids about it. I'm so glad Burnett wasn't the one who drank it. If not, I would have never forgiven myself." I floated in the air as I watched my family walk away. I thought so. I didn't even cause Burnett's death. Mom was the culprit all along, and she blamed it all on me just to make herself feel better. The one thing I was incredibly reluctant to admit was that Mom never loved me at all. Returning to my senses, I drifted outside. I happened to hear Dad comforting Mom. "This isn't your fault. If Dahlia weren't such a glutton, this wouldn't have happened." Dad didn't care about me either. He seemed rational and calm as he began writing my obituary and making the funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, Burnett was singing cheerfully in Mom's arms. After I died, the household became more peaceful than ever. At my funeral, whenever someone asked about how I died, Mom kept telling them I was being too greedy and mistook disinfectant for a drink. Aunt Greta discreetly pulled Mom aside. "You're the one who put the disinfectant in the wrong bottle. So how could you blame her for not knowing better? The child's already dead, so we should honor her. We can't even rest in peace if you keep saying that." Mom didn't seem too bothered by it. "She's already dead, So why does it matter if she's at peace or not? Do you seriously want me to tell everyone that it was my fault? I smiled bitterly. After Burnett died, Mom constantly thought about her and all the things she could have had. But now that I was the one who died, she just shrugged it off. Death suddenly showed up. He asked me, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. There was no point in dragging out a life filled with nothing but pain. I'm just glad that I could trade my life for Burnett's, so she can keep living a happy and innocent life. Burnett suddenly asked Mom, "What's Dahlia doing? Why won't she get up and play with me?" Mom thought about it for a moment. Then she asked earnestly, "Burnett, you may not get to see Dahlia ever again. Do you feel sad about it?" Burnett carefully thought about what Mom meant. Soon she clapped her hands and said joyfully, "Yay. I don't have to share my toys ever again. I can have the room all to myself." My heart sank. No one in my family cared about me at all. Death seemed more upset about it than I was. "Let's make another deal. I'll talk to your mom in a dream. If she shows even a hint of guilt towards you, I can restore everything to the way it was before you jumped off the building. Child, would you like to make that wager with me?" I nodded. After thinking for a moment, I asked, "Can we turn the bet around? If Mom doesn't feel any guilt toward me, you'll let things return to their original course." Death didn't quite understand. "It can be done, but are you sure you really want that?" "Honestly, I've never seen a mother this heartless. She may love your sister more, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you at all, right?" I nodded firmly. "I've made up my mind. If Mom feels any guilt, it means she still loves me, even if it's just a tiny bit. I won't regret what I'm doing. But if she still doesn't care about me at all, I can go on living for myself without any burdens." Death agreed. That night, Mom had a long dream. I saw her frowning deeply in her sleep. Death told me that Mom saw Burnett passing away after resuscitation efforts failed, and she also saw how I resigned myself to the cruelty I faced. Lastly, she saw me making a deal with Death without any hesitation. Beth told me that even he himself was touched. "Your mom can't possibly stay indifferent after all that. You're losing the bet." I forced a smile on my lips, but I didn't say anything. Suddenly, Mom opened her eyes. I felt a little anxious as I watched her. She quickly got out of bed. She scrambled to open the door, then ran to the room I shared with Burnett. She took a deep breath and mustered her courage before opening the door. The bedroom was drowned in the gray hues of midnight. From the shadow beside the wardrobe, Death stood like a tall column of frozen mist, his pale fingers resting lightly on Dahlia's ghost shoulder. Beside him, Dahlia floated, weightless, hollowed out, but staring intently at the woman standing by the door. Eleanor Emerson took a shuddering breath. Her hair was wild, her nightgown damp, with cold sweat from the nightmare Death had just poured into her brain. In that dream, she had lived through 13 long, suffocating years where Burnett died. On the emergency room table, where Dahlia survived, where Dahlia was starved, blinded and psychological broken, and where Dahlia finally threw herself off a roof just to pay back a debt that didn't exist. Death leaned down, his voice like the rustle of dead leaves near Dahlia's ear. "Watch carefully, child. This is where her heart fractures. This is where the guilt tears her apart." Dahlia didn't answer. She only watched her mother's hands. Eleanor slowly pushed open the bedroom door. The soft, rhythmically steady breathing of a child filled the room. On the small twin bed near the window lay 4-year-old Burnett, curled around a yellow plush bear, her cheeks pink and warm with life. Eleanor crossed the carpet in 3 hurried strides and fell to her knees beside Burnett's bed. She reached out with trembling hands, pressing her fingers against Burnett's neck, searching frantically for a pulse. Thump, thump, thump. A strong, vibrant heartbeat fluttered against Eleanor's palm. For 3 long seconds, Eleanor remained frozen, and then a long, ragged sound escaped her throat. Death tilted his head, waiting for the sob of remorse, the bitter tears for the child currently lying cold in the hospital morgue down the street, the child who had drunk the disinfectant just hours ago so Burnett could live. But no tears came. Instead, Eleanor's shoulders dropped. The tension in her posture melted away, replaced by an intoxicating, suffocating surge of relief. A slow, grotesque smile stretched across her face, pulling her pale lips thin over her teeth. "Thank God," Eleanor whispered into the quiet dark, her voice trembling with intense, dizzying joy. "Thank God it was Dahlia." Beside Dahlia, Death's misty frame flickered. Eleanor smoothed Burnett's hair with tender, obsessed care, muttering to herself. In the dark, her eyes wide and glittering. "I saw it. I saw that awful dream. If Burnett had died, I would have been stuck with her. 18 years of a gluttonous, blind, ungrateful parasite dragging us down, costing us money, ruining our lives. She let out a soft, breathy chuckle, kissing Burnett's forehead. Dahlia died. Today. It's over. We don't have to pay for ICU. We can buy the piano now. Burnett, my sweet Burnett gets everything. She didn't look at the empty bed across the room. She didn't spare a single thought for the 5-year-old girl whose stomach had just been burned to ash by industrial chemical poison. To Eleanor, Dahlia's death wasn't a tragedy, it was a miraculous, convenient divine trade-off. In the shadows, Death stood completely motionless. For the first time since Dahlia had met him, the ancient entity seemed shaken. Death's deep, resonant voice wavered with genuine bewilderment. She saw your entire life. She saw your sacrifice. And her only thought is that you were a financial burden best discarded. Dahlia looked up at Death. Her face was strangely serene. There were no tears left in her spectral eyes, no crushing weight in her chest. The suffocating, phantom chain that had bound her heart for as long as she could remember snapped silently into dust. I told you, Dahlia said softly. Her voice was as smooth and clear as glass. She never loved me, not even a tiny bit. Death turned his pale, featureless face toward Dahlia. I lost the wager. Yes, Dahlia replied. You lost. Now, keep your promise. Death closed his eyes. When he opened them, dark crimson flames flickered in his empty sockets. The contract forged on a lie is null and void. You offered your life to redeem a guilt that was forced upon you by a monster. Fate will not accept such an unfair exchange. Death raised his skeletal hand, pressing 2 ice-cold fingers against Dahlia's forehead. The wager is settled, Death declared, his voice echoing like thunder inside her mind. I return you to your path, but you will no longer walk it in darkness. Crash. The sharp, violent snapping of heavy pine branches exploded in Dahlia's ears. Air rushed into her lungs with a violent, agonizing gasp. The wind screamed past her ears as gravity yanked her body downward through the night air. 18 years old. The roof. The free fall. Instead of plunging straight into the unforgiving concrete below, her body smashed through the thick, overgrown branches of the old oak tree growing beside the residential building. Leaves whipped against her face. Thick boughs bent and snapped under her weight, absorbing the crushing force of her descent before dumping her heavily onto the damp, soft dirt of the flower bed. Pain. A sharp, white-hot knife tore through her right lower leg as the bone cracked. Under the impact, she slammed onto her side, coughing violently, dirt in her mouth, her chest heaving as icy rain began to drizzle from the night sky. She was alive. She lay on her back, staring up at the dark silhouette of the roof far above. Her vision, usually cloudy and dimmed by years of malnutrition and untreated eye strain, was suddenly crisp, clear, and sharp. She could see the individual needles of the pine tree overhead. She could see the faint glow of the streetlights reflecting in the raindrops. Her right leg throbbed with brutal, sharp pain, but inside her chest, the suffocating black poison of guilt was completely gone. Over here, my God, someone fell. Heavy footsteps thundered down the pavement. Flashlights cut through the rain. Old Mr. Henderson, the night security guard, came running around the corner, his mouth agape as his flashlight beam hit Dahlia, lying in the flower bed. Dahlia? Oh Lord, child, don't move. Don't move. Mr. Henderson dropped to his knees in the mud, his hands trembling as he pulled out his radio. Dispatch. Call an ambulance. Top priority. A resident fell from the roof. Dahlia lay in the mud, panting heavily. She looked at Mr. Henderson's panicked face. Mr. Henderson. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Don't speak, honey, help is coming. Just hold on. Mr. Henderson. Dahlia rasped, reaching out with a mud-stained hand to grab his sleeve. Pepper, the stray orange cat. Mr. Henderson paused, looking utterly bewildered. The orange cat? What about him? My mom. Dahlia choked out, the memory of her mother's cruel words fresh in her mind. She said you killed him, tossed him in the bin. What? Mr. Henderson's eyes widened in absolute shock and fury. Is she crazy? That cat is sitting in my security booth, right now eating a bowl of tuna. Your mother came down 2 hours ago screaming at me to drown the poor thing or put him in a trash compactor, and I told her to take a hike before I called animal control on her. Dahlia froze. The rain washed over her pale face. A quiet, breathless sound escaped her lips. It was a lie. Everything had been a lie. Her mother hadn't watched Pepper die. She had simply made up the story, staged a fake video or stolen a grotesque image off the internet, just to break Dahlia's heart and drive her over the edge. A cold, sharp laughter began to bubble up from Dahlia's chest. It started as a tiny rattle, then grew into a clear, ringing laugh that echoed in the rainy night. She laughed until tears mixed with the raindrops on her cheeks. Child. Mr. Henderson looked at her with deep worry, gently pressing a dry jacket over her chest. Are you all right? I'm fine, Dahlia whispered, looking up at the black sky with brilliant, clear eyes. I've never been better in my entire life. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Dahlia sat propped up against crisp white pillows, her right leg encased in a heavy plaster cast and suspended slightly above the bed. And 4 drip ticked quietly beside her. The door to the private room was kicked open with a bang. Eleanor Emerson stormed into the room like a hurricane of noise, her face twisted into a mask of theatrical rage and indignation. Behind her slouched Dahlia's father, Richard, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, looking thoroughly irritated to have his sleep disrupted. You ungrateful, selfish little brat. Eleanor shrieked before she even reached the foot of the bed. Her voice vibrated off the tile walls, loud enough to draw glances from nurses passing by in the corridor. Throwing yourself off a roof. Over a worthless street animal? Do you have any idea what time it is? Do you have any idea how much a private room and an emergency orthopedic surgery cost? She slammed her handbag down onto the bedside table. Your sister died because of your greed, and now you want to ruin us financially, too. Eleanor jabbed a sharp, manicured finger toward Dahlia's face. The doctors said you need 2 months of bed rest. Who is going to pay for your medicine? Who is going to feed you while you sit here doing nothing? In the past, Dahlia would have shrunk back. She would have pulled the blanket up to her chin, lowered her head, and apologized profusely through suffocating tears, believing every single word of her mother's venom. Now Dahlia simply sat there. She looked at her mother's red, furious face. She observed the tiny, fake wrinkles around her eyes, the theatrical arch of her eyebrows, the absolute lack of genuine human concern. She looked at her father, who stood by the window, scrolling through his phone, completely indifferent. Dahlia felt nothing. No fear. No sadness. No desire for their love. Seeing Dahlia's silence, Eleanor assumed her traditional psychological torture was working. A smug, familiar glint flashed in her eyes. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small glass candle holder and a box of matches, the exact ritual she had used to cage Dahlia for 13 years. I knew you wouldn't listen, Eleanor sneered, placing the candle firmly on the bedside tray. You never learn. We're going to ask Burnett right now if she forgives you for making such a disgusting spectacle of yourself. Eleanor struck a match. The small flame flared to life, illuminating the dark corner of the hospital room. She lit the wick. If this candle stays lit for 1 minute, Eleanor declared in her grand, authoritative tone, it means Burnett thinks you deserve to suffer for what you've done. And you won't get a single penny from us for your recovery. Eleanor pulled out her phone, setting the timer. 1 minute starts. Full. Dahlia leaned forward smoothly and blew out the candle. A thin strand of white smoke curled up from the black wick, drifting lazily into the air between them. The silence in the room hit like a physical blow. Eleanor froze, the match still burning near her fingers until it nearly scorched her skin. She dropped it into the tray, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with shock. She had used this candle trick hundreds of times since Dahlia was 5 years old, and Dahlia had always sat in paralyzed terror, counting the seconds, watching the wick burn endlessly. Why you? Eleanor's voice cracked, her composure shattering into jagged pieces. How dare you? How dare you disrespect your dead sister? Burnett didn't die because of me, Dahlia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was remarkably steady, carried by an icy, absolute authority that cut Eleanor off mid-sentence. Richard finally looked up from his phone, frowning. Dahlia, don't talk to your mother like that. Burnett died, Dahlia continued, staring directly into Eleanor's pale eyes, because you put industrial-strength disinfectant inside an unlabeled plastic juice bottle and left it on the bottom shelf of the kitchen door when she was 4 years old. Eleanor's face turned from red to an ash-white gray in a fraction of a second. What nonsense are you talking about? You filled that bottle. You told her to. Drink it. I was 5 years old, Dahlia said softly, a cold smile touching her lips.
A
5-year-old doesn't know what disinfectant is. A 5-year-old can't reach the high shelf where the cleaning supplies were kept. You were negligent. You were careless. You left poison where a toddler could reach it, and when Burnett drank it and died in the ICU, you were so terrified of being blamed by Dad and the police that you pinned the entire thing on a 5-year-old child who didn't know any better. Shut up, Eleanor screamed, stepping forward to slap Dahlia across the face. Shut your mouth.
grab.
Dahlia caught Eleanor's wrist midair. Her grip was surprisingly firm. Dahlia looked at her mother's trembling hand, then pushed it away with effortless disdain. You used a drafted room and a thick wicked candle to make sure it would never go out on its own, Dahlia whispered, leaning closer.
You starved me.
You let my eyes go bad. You denied me medicine. You called me a murderer every day for 13 years just so you could sleep at night without admitting to yourself that you killed your own favorite child. You're crazy, Eleanor stammered, backing away until her spine hit the
Doorframe.
Richard, look at her. She's lost her mind. Is she crazy, Eleanor? Or is she finally telling the truth? A stern voice rang out from the doorway. Standing in the entrance was Aunt Greta, Eleanor's older sister, accompanied by a tall police officer in uniform and a hospital social worker. Greta walked into the room, her boots clicking sharply against the tile. Her face was set in a scowl of pure disgust as she looked at Eleanor. Greta? Eleanor gasped, panic flaring in her eyes. What are you doing here? The property manager called me when Dahlia fell, Greta said coldly, crossing her arms. And I brought Officer Miller with me because I knew the moment you walked into this room, you'd start tearing this girl down again. Greta turned her head to look at Richard, then back at Eleanor. I told you. 13 years ago, Eleanor. At the funeral. I told you I saw you buy that exact brand of disinfectant at the market the morning before Burnett died. I told you to stop blaming a 5-year-old child for your fatal negligence, but you kept spinning your sick little eye because you couldn't bear the thought of people knowing what a terrible mother you were. The police officer took out a small notebook, his expression dark as he observed Eleanor's pale, trembling form. Mrs. Emerson, we received a report from property management regarding animal cruelty allegations and psychological abuse involving a minor under your care prior to her 18th birthday yesterday. Furthermore, given the statements made here, we may be reopening the inquiry into the circumstances surrounding your younger child's death. Reopening. Eleanor shrieked, her voice high and breathless. That was 13 years ago. It was an accident. She was a child. Which one was the child, Eleanor? Greta snapped bitterly. Burnett or Dahlia? Eleanor choked on her words. She looked at Richard for help, but Richard had already taken 3 steps back, quietly putting his phone away, his posture radiating cowardice as he attempted to distance himself from his wife. Dahlia watched the entire circus unfold from her hospital bed. She felt no triumph. She felt no satisfaction in seeing her mother crumble. She simply felt finished. Officer, Dahlia said calmly, attracting the policeman's attention. I turned 18 yesterday. I am legally an adult. I want a formal restraining order against both of them. I do not want them in this room. I do not want them near my recovery, and I will be filing for a total severance of legal ties. Dahlia, Eleanor gasped, trying to take a step forward, her eyes wide with desperation, not out of love, but out of the sudden terror of losing control over her lifelong scapegoat. I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. Who will take care of you? Mr. Henderson is bringing Pepper to the shelter across the street until I'm discharged, Dahlia said, her voice entirely devoid of emotion. He's taking care of me more than you ever did. Get out, Aunt Greta ordered, pointing a finger at the door. Get out of her room before I give the officer every letter you ever sent me blaming Dahlia for your own mistakes. Eleanor opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to put on another grand performance, but Officer Miller stepped firmly between her and the bed, placing a heavy hand on his belt.
Mom.
Step outside now. Defeated, humiliated, and stripped of her power, Eleanor was ushered out into the hallway, her frantic protests fading into the sterile distance. Richard followed silently behind her, not once looking back at his surviving daughter. The door clicked softly as it closed. Silence returned to the room. Aunt Greta walked over to the side of the bed, reaching out to gently touch Dahlia's hand. Her eyes were soft with deep, long overdue regret.
I'm sorry, Dahlia.
I should have stepped in years ago. I should have taken you away from her. Dahlia looked at her aunt. She knew Greta had tried in small ways over the years, but Eleanor's tyrannical grip on the household had made intervention difficult. It's okay, Aunt Greta, Dahlia said softly. I'm out now. 6 months later, the afternoon sun streamed through the wide bay window of a small, bright, top-floor apartment on the quiet side of the city. The room smelled of fresh paint, lavender, and warm, toasted bread. On the wooden windowsill, a large, plump orange cat lay sprawled on his side, his belly facing the warm sun, purring like a tiny engine. Dahlia sat at a small wooden dining table. She wore a bright, butter-yellow summer dress with white floral prints, pretty, soft, and entirely her own. Her right leg had healed completely, leaving only a faint, neat scar near her ankle that served as a quiet badge of her survival. Her vision, fully restored with proper glasses and medical treatment, caught every vibrant detail of the world around her: the green of the potted ferns lining the balcony, the golden speckles of dust dancing in the sunlight, the deep, rich colors of the world she had been denied for 18 years. With a small settlement from her father, who had quickly agreed to pay for her college tuition and living expenses in exchange for Dahlia not pressing formal charges regarding historical child neglect, she had secured this apartment, enrolled in a community college graphic design program, and started working part-time at a local bakery. There was a light knock at the front door. Dahlia stood up, her yellow dress swishing around her knees, and opened it. Aunt Greta stood in the hallway holding a square bakery box tied with a red ribbon. Happy 19th birthday, Dahlia, Greta said with a warm, beaming smile. Thanks, Aunt Greta. Come in, Dahlia smiled back, stepping aside. Pepper immediately lifted his head from the windowsill, let out a loud, demanding meow, and trotted over to rub his cheek against Greta's ankles. Greta laughed, setting the box down on the table and scratching the cat behind his ears. He's certainly not starving anymore, is he? He eats better than I do, Dahlia teased, fetching 2 side plates and forks from the kitchen cabinet. Greta untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside sat a small, perfectly round chocolate cake. It was coated in a glossy, dark chocolate mirror glaze, topped with swirls of whipped cream and brilliant red strawberries. Dahlia stared at it for a moment. In 18 years, she had never known what cake tasted like. Her mother had always claimed that eating cake was a luxury reserved for children who hadn't
Killed their sisters.
Greta pulled out a single, thin wax candle from her bag, then hesitated, looking at Dahlia with sudden uncertainty. Oh, Dahlia, I'm sorry, I brought a candle. Without thinking. It's fine, Dahlia interrupted gently. She took the candle from Greta's hand, stuck it firmly into the center of the chocolate glaze, and let Greta light it with a small lighter. The tiny yellow flame flickered merrily atop the cake, casting a warm, glowing light across the table. Dahlia didn't set a timer. She didn't count to 60.
She didn't look for drafts
in the room. She didn't ask a ghost for permission to exist. She simply closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a wish, not for love from people who were incapable of giving it, but for a long, beautiful, peaceful life built entirely by her own hands. Dahlia opened her eyes and blew out the candle in one soft, gentle breath. The flame vanished. A sweet, faint trail of smoke drifted up toward the ceiling and disappeared into the bright, sunny room. What did you wish for? Greta asked softly, cutting a slice of the cake and placing it on Dahlia's plate. Dahlia picked up her fork, took a bite of the rich, velvety chocolate, and let the sweetness melt on her tongue. It was sweet, slightly bitter, and intoxicatingly real. She looked out the window at the blue sky, then down at Pepper, who was now purring softly beside her chair, waiting for a drop of cream. Dahlia smiled, a real, radiant smile that reached all the way to her eyes. Nothing, Dahlia said softly, taking another bite. I already have everything I need.